Marilyn, thank you so much for allowing us to visit your studio. That's really beautiful. Where are you? Where is your studio right now? Where are you right now?
I am in Cold Spring, New York, and it's right near Dia, and it's a really great place to quarantine because I have streams and property, and we can walk around. And my dog, my husband's my dog, we're all here. My dog's my husband, we're here.
I like the sequencing. Marilyn, how do you feel right now? We are now 8 weeks into the lockdown. How do you feel about the situation, and can you be productive, or is it more for you a time to reflect, or more a time to pause and reflect on where to go and what to do and what's the future going to?
I've actually never met an artist who doesn't mind isolating. You know, it's really kind of great on one level because I get to work all the time and there's very few interruptions. And it's just a little more difficult in terms of I work with people that are techies, and so we have to work Zoom or FaceTime, and then I have to drive down to the city to print at my loft because that's where my printer is. So I just go back and forth all the time. I have a studio on 36th Street. I go there, I pick up supplies. If I have an underpainter and they need a color, I'll just go bring it to them because I drive. So I'm getting everything I need done except for I'm making a huge painting for my next show that's been postponed, and I just can't get the structures made because there's no delivery for metal. But that's you know, I mean, given the times we're in, I feel like I'm really lucky. I know how privileged this is.
Yeah, I'm also very grateful. Also grateful, first of all, grateful to be still healthy.
Yeah, me too.
Very fortunate. We should be grateful. How do you think this pause, this crisis will affect art? Will your art change, or are you trying to record the time right now? How are you visualizing this, or just storing it as an artist?
Well, I think I'm processing it. I think, you know, really good art is making a clarity out of, you know, confusion. And I think we're right in the middle of it, and we're on uncharted territory. I don't see how it's not going to change, you know, people's work, because the art I'm interested in is really about the times we live in, and I'm profoundly affected by it. But it's going to be an organic, you know, I think an organic process to where the art comes out. And then you're going to have to tell me what it all means. But I'm just making it because it feels good, or it's my vision right now. I've made a couple of things that are, you know, located in this period. You'll see them later.
Yeah. You were a successful artist already with studio practice and gallery shows and everything when the AIDS pandemic happened. Was that something for you that influenced your work, was processed in your work?
So I was right at this, you know, all my friends were dying in droves. My entire building was just decimated because I had all dancers in my building. And I worked with ACT UP. I went on all their marches and their protests. And, you know, it was a plague that wiped out half the people I know that were gay, just half of them. But this is really different. I know people make, you know, I think they're really different experiences. This is the plague that affects, you know, men, women, and children. That was sort of affecting just a segment of the population that were, you know, ignored for 5 years, I think, or 4 years before Reagan even mentioned the word AIDS. And I mean, that's what happened with this administration too. They ignored it for 2 months, but you know, the nature catches up with you. Nature fights back, you know, obviously. I'm hoping that there's a different calculation of how we're going to proceed in the future, but that's wishful thinking perhaps. But yeah. I can work towards it anyway. That's all I can do is act locally. I can work towards being kinder to the planet.
Yeah, for me, these studio visits are an important way of how to translate the access that a museum has to the artist, to you, to the other artist, for a wider audience, because you are not only also more in charge of your own. You said, oh, I don't know an artist who doesn't like isolation. You are more in charge of your own schedule, of your time planning. But of course, also how you deal with this time and how thoughtful your comments are is something that I'm really grateful we can share. So with that said, perhaps let's dive into the slideshow we prepared together. So we are starting
drawings that I know, that I have. I found these in Fairy Tale, and I just thought it was so, I drew all the time in fly leaves, on books, because we had a big library when I was growing up. And I had these fairy tales and I had encyclopedias. So all the pictures you're seeing are from different fairy tales, encyclopedias. And I started teaching myself, I could draw better than my friends. I saw that when I was about 5 years old.
So that's early 50s in Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
We imagine you early 50s in Florida doing these. And perhaps we go one back in the slides. I think it's so interesting that at early age, what you are drawing is a high-heeled shoe.
That's why I put it in here on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale page.
You were a Girl Scout at the time, right?
I taught myself how to draw from comic books because I was in a cultural desert, basically, Miami Beach, Florida, and then Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And the next slide is Brenda Starr, who was, I think I was interested in her because she made a life for herself. She was a girl reporter, and she, she took, she wasn't, it was a comic, and so I think the glamour girl, she had a twinkle in her eye. Probably most of your, the people that are watching this are too young to remember this comic series, but I used Prince Valiant. I used, this is how I taught myself how to draw. There wasn't art classes that I could take.
So when you were a school child, you imagined, were you thinking of possibly becoming an artist? Was this an option, or was?
Absolutely. From the time I can remember, that's the only thing I was really excelled at being able to draw. So it was the only thing I did better than other people. And I never looked back. It wasn't like I had tons of opportunities to become other things. This was the only thing I ever could do. And I'm a good teacher too. So those are my two professions. I've had them my entire life.
Working the Coral Ridge Towers, that's a body of work where you were basically in the University of Florida, and you had a visiting mentor, visiting artist at the time. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Well, I was just a weekend, and I grew up in South Florida in the 50s and the 60s, and it was basically the land of my parents. And it was where people went, in those days to escape. And my mother was a drug addict. My father left her for a friend of hers, and the rest of their community sided with the new couple. And my mother had a nervous breakdown, and she became a drug addict. And but I didn't really know what was going on. I just thought she was crazy. And I came down for a weekend. I just said, "Hey, Mom, let me shoot your picture." And she said, "Sure." And it really does probably anchor all my work, but at the time I didn't realize it. I was just taking a picture of my mother on a weekend, and she was very unusual for my friends, but mothers. But when I went to northern Florida, the school, and showed these photos, I got shamed. I said, "My God," people were saying, "That's your mother?" And I said, "Oh shit, I'm never showing these again." I had waves of shame come over me, because there's a really conservative area, and everyone's from the deep South, and it was before Oprah, it was before too much information. People didn't talk about these things. And my mother's beauty she was a great beauty at one time, and it was off though. I mean, she pulled out her hair. There's a name for that. and she had to wear wigs. This is her dyeing her eyebrows. And you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, I'm just
Go back a little. Go back just a little. So Diane Arbus came to my school to I was an undergraduate, and she came to see the graduate students. And so my school was very romantic, and the head of the department was taking her around, and I was a lowly undergraduate, and I happened to walk by, and she hated everything she saw from the students. So my teacher said, Marilyn, bring your contact sheets from the pictures you took of your mother. And I didn't even know who she was, because I was an undergraduate. We didn't get to mix with the grad students. And she said she loved them. And it was the first time I had anybody say that. And but I didn't know who she was until I was in grad school myself, and she killed herself. And I saw the same woman in Life magazine. But it was pretty interesting, because that was my first pat on the back, so to speak.
Yeah. It's incredible that she selected your work. And when you look at the captions, this work is from 1969. You were just 20, 21 that time. And then you published them again in the mid-90s. It took that time, but they look like...
Yeah, I didn't show them because I was ashamed, I was sort of ashamed. This was, some of the reaction I got. It wasn't like, oh, these are great photos.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting reason why I showed them in 95, and I'll get to that. But I sort of put them away.
Yeah, let's jump a bit, nearly a decade later, 8 years later.
And I'm in New York City, and it was the height of the photorealism movement. And I thought, oh, I can do that. And I put this linoleum down on my floor, and I thought, these are really interesting to me. I was trying to make these figure ground relationships, and with things that were just lying around. And it's the beginning of everything I ever do. It's like, oh, this is an important one. This is, I thought I was brilliant. I thought, oh, wow, I know what I'll do.
Oh, brilliant.
I'll take black and white photographs, and I threw them on the floor, because all photography then was black and white. And I printed all of this in my darkroom. And could you show the paintings before? Those are the paintings, and then go to the next one. And those are the photos that I worked for. So the three of these images go together. And I thought, I'm so smart. Everyone's going to love this work. And I took it to all the photorealist galleries. I just moved to New York. And they said, well, yeah, this is photorealism, but it's really boring. So nobody wanted it at all. They weren't interested in the least. So I also made this clay photograph, a black and white photo of that same piece of plywood on the floor. And I made a whole bunch of these, but this is the only one that's left, I'm sorry to say. But I thought it was really smart. Nobody was interested in any of this work, so I had it all.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, because when people describe your work, I would always describe you as a conceptual artist. And here we see a sculpture of
photo.
For a reproduction of a photo of an object you photographed. So it's kind of like 5 levels of representation. And of course, and that's from 1979. So that's an early piece in a way. It's a pioneering piece. So perhaps you were just too early for your...
That's my life in a way, but I'm so used to that. I'm okay with it. I'm used to it now. Okay, this is, I was getting so ignored, but I kept going, making them anyway, because I had so much fun doing them. So I was making spills on the floor. This is just a spill of Tab, that drink from the 70s. And then I made scuff marks on the floor, and light. There's another black and white photo. I made a whole series of these black and white photos, but I left them in this this was the canvas, the raw canvas. I left them so you'd see these are paintings, not black and white photos. And I made them slightly bigger than an 8x10 photo. I made a whole series of these, and I still have them all.
Such important work. It's really such important work. And now I think going forward, we actually make a jump in the work and we go to your collaborations. So that's nearly a decade later. That's mid 80s, 1986. You asked me, Klaus, what were you doing in 1986? I just finished school. But in 1986, you worked with another artist, and you were influenced by, let's say, conceptual expressionists, like, let's say, like a Sigmar Polke you mentioned.
I worked with Christoph Kohlhofer. He was a German artist who came over here way before we even knew about polka. And but he knew that they were collaborators. And they did movies together, and he taught me about projection. So we made these paintings. Well, I wanted to be part of the vernacular. I wanted to be in the dialogue. This was the East Village, and it was when neo-expressionism just exploded. And my work seemed, like, well, I got this skill level, but what can I do with it? So, it didn't seem like I'd make anything interesting. So we painted together, and I think these paintings were great, but people were interested in them, but we were fighting so much. And the reason we were fighting so much is because he didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't know what he was going to do. We were trading these canvases back and forth. And as you know, artists, we are soul-suckingly self-involved. And when you're constantly painting on top of one another, it couldn't last. So we ended up breaking up the collaboration. And that's when I went to enamel painting.
I see in this work, Marilyn, and in the works, conceptual
these are big paintings
of photography, you see the layering of panels, planes, and layers. That's something that we will look into your current production very much. But I do see the layering, the planes, the transparency and opacity in these layers already from these early 70s works. And if you say you're trading canvases, I just imagine that very kind of literally, like, here, you get it.
Right on top of everything I did. That dog, there's a dog, you could see his eyes.
Yeah, I'm putting it further there. Here's the eyes.
He didn't know what I was going to do on top of him. So it was a really interesting collaboration. I learned a lot from him. But it had to end because we were too volatile. And I started working with enamel paint because my next body of work, I thought, had to look nothing like what I did in the collaboration team. And we were sort of known in the East Village. And I was thinking about, when I made this is a Sophia Loren, it's a really famous photo. And I had a whole room of these little girls looking in the funhouse mirror. And can you go back for 1 second, please?
Doing that.
And just go back to the Sophia Loren one.
We're there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Asa. And you can see in the middle, there's a fracture of a little girl looking in a funhouse mirror. And I was thinking in terms of the big girls and the little girls. So Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield there's this kind of competition or distortion. And I distorted the canvas, I distorted the projector, and I just painted dots, and I just gave up my skill level. I turned the projector on and just painted with enamel. You can keep going.
Yeah.
This is the big girls and the little girls were across the room. So I made a whole series of these.
The next body of work is perhaps one of the bodies of work you're famous for, Marilyn. You started with food porn, and you said, like, you had like lots of assistants and you were layering these paintings, and I'm showing some of these detailed paintings.
Well,
you had nothing to pay them for, so everybody who was your assistant got some of the paintings. There was a true teamwork collaboration, and that ended up, it was an exhibition, of course, but it also ended up as a video because you made...
I made the paintings to make the video. I wanted to make, but I wanted to make the first TV commercial that advertised the show. And I wanted to, well, don't start it yet. No. Can you go back to that one painting real quick? Yeah, I would do the underpainting, and my assistants would paint the dots. I had 3 assistants, and we worked night and day in those days. And the whole idea was to make a TV commercial. And I rented time on David Letterman, Arsenio Hall, and Nightline. And how much do you think it would cost to rent 30 seconds on David Letterman in 1989, 1990?
I would think right now it would be a couple of $100,000, right? How much was it then?
Everyone thought that. It was $1,800.
God, amazing.
So how art magazines, they advertise the show and they pay a lot of money for the ads. So I asked the two galleries I was working with to give me the money they used to advertise in Art Forum and Art News, etc. And I bought time on David Letterman and Arsenio Hall, but Nightline was $2,000. So, and then I traded. I had no money, you know. I was this kid on Mercer Street, and I traded the paintings for the production costs. So you can show the commercial if you want.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Let's show it.
In which our effort in the Middle East collapses.
Let me ask you just to take a break for a second. We've got to take a quick break, and I'll come back and let you continue that thought when we continue our conversation with Henry Kissinger and James Webb in a moment.
Let's watch a little further. I love how
is this like incense? You put incense or something in there?
It's a microphone, actually.
Oh, that's decent. But see, you knew that.
Yeah,
and I didn't. That's the point.
You were in Philly saying, well, you gotta take commercial. Take commercial,
Already?
We'll come right back, and our mothers will be out here, and they'll fight for a while. We'll be right back.
Two of your favorites, M&M's and peanut butter, are together at last. Introducing M&M's peanut butter chocolate candies. Pure milk chocolate, real peanut butter, your favorite chocolate candy, now with creamy peanut butter. New M&M's peanut butter chocolate candies. The best thing to happen to peanut butter since jelly.
M&M, Marilyn Minter. It's your sweets.
I painted all these M&Ms too. It was an homage to the ellipse painter Larry Poons. But I used M&Ms instead. But I'll show you those someday. The next button.
You described yourself as a sex-positive feminist.
Very good. Well, I thought that everyone thought like I did. And this whole body of work coming up is when I got thrown out of the art world, basically. But I just saw the Mike Kelly show, and I thought it was just brilliant. It was at Metro Pictures, and here he is, this intellectual from California, making paintings out of stuffed animal sculptures and stuffed animal paintings and felt banners, and I thought, this is a real thing. This is like mall culture. This is some 13-year-old girl's adolescent girl, and he's mining this. And I thought, now if a woman artist made this work, she wouldn't get any attention whatsoever. People would not be interested. So what occurred to me was, what is it that women could do that men have never touched? I mean, what is it that women could do that they've never touched before? What have they never, because this is a guy who worked with this adolescent spirit. And I thought of porn. I thought, well, it can't be just porn. It can't be just softcore. It had to be hardcore. And I started making these hardcore porn paintings with cum shots. And I thought 3 or 4 things. I thought, number one, does it change the meaning to, if women own the production of sexual imagery. 2, I thought that nobody has politically correct fantasies. And 3, I thought, well, what happens when I ask these questions? And so I made this whole body of work showing it, thinking all the feminists were thinking like I was, this pro-sex feminist. And I basically got excoriating reviews. My dealer shut the show down early. Nothing sold. And I was basically kicked out of shows. And I was sort of devastated because I just didn't expect it. I thought everyone thought like I did. Wasn't for a second thinking I was being provocative.
Who were your who was most critical about this work, Marilyn?
Elizabeth Hess wrote this whole article about me. I mean, God, it was too painful. Comparing my work to Cindy Sherman, who was my idol at the time, and how her work was exposing demons and mine was empty, empty porn. And I was feeling so beat up, I started beating up my paintings. Go back to that next one, yeah. That painting, I started putting acid on the metal. I never stopped working. And I started taking a belt standard to my painting because I was feeling so beat up. But I just said, I'll do it anyway. That was my plan. I'm not gonna stop, But the interesting thing is the internet happened, and basically here's one where I just beat the shit out of the painting. And my side won.
It's interesting to think about you in the in the same sphere, in the same time bracket. When you mentioned Cindy Sherman and the Pictures generation, you mentioned Mike Kelly on the other side, and you have your trajectory that you see what both of them are doing, and you are doing your own. You're doing your own work. And
was making that those demonic sexual imagery. I never knew what she was doing. We opened right around the same time, but I was really surprised, and I thought her work was brilliant. I always have, and we're good friends now. But and she liked what I was doing, but it was just like there was such fear about feminists dealing with sexual imagery. It was like seemingly at the time a traitor to feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was labeled. How dare I? And I came out of it, and I started working with enamel, but working with it. And I guess here I am a photorealist because I started working from. This is how I got out. Oh, interesting. This is what you're gonna love. When I got let back in the art world, when I showed the photos of my mother in 1995, because the art world could tolerate me because I think it looked like I came from dysfunction. Well, I did, but an artist and great artists always come from dysfunction. So then I was considered somebody to be taken seriously after all. And I wasn't a traitor to feminism.
Yeah. So incredible how perception is time specific, but of course is also informed by works before and after, and what people are looking at this very time. I show two more of these in the mid 2000s, 2004, 2005.
So I was thinking about, I was going to work with imagery that exists, but nobody ever saw pictures of it. So you never saw paintings of armpit hair or paintings of your hair being dyed or dirty feet with nice manicures and pedicures. And I thought, well, these are things that exist, but no one's ever seen them. And that's basically what all the work I've been doing ever since has been about. This is armpit. This is a photo. And the paintings took me so long. I was working with enamel paint, layers and layers of it, that I couldn't fill up the walls of shows. So I started showing the photos that I took along with, I think who was it? Miss Powers. This is Amy Fallon. She was my model. I have so many works of her from her. She was such a great model for me. I wanted to show, they always show women kissing jewelry, and I wanted to just shove it down their mouths, and see what that looks like. Or really expensive shoes, but if you're going to dance all night, you have dirty feet. And just
showing a couple of these series in the mid 2000s until this was a series
Billboards all over Chelsea. I did this with Creative Time, and it was the very same time as the Whitney Biennial, which I was featured in, and that was when the art world started paying attention to what I was doing again, because of the Billboards and Whitney, and these are paintings that were in the Whitney Biennial. And at this point, I started really working with Photoshop, combining images, and this is these are all paintings. This is a photo. No, I'm sorry, this is a painting, and this is a photo. Yeah, also another thing you never see are freckles. So I thought I was, besides working with, mud and dirt, I thought I'd also show Photoshop freckles. This is a big painting, actually. You never see freckles in popular culture. They're always Photoshopped out.
Freckles and sweat and dirt and
I'm covered in freckles myself, so I thought, well, all the actually Julia, oh geez, darn it, I can't think of her name. She's an actress covered in freckles, and I was the first person that I photographed her for paper. More, and I drew her freckles back in because they'd already been lasered off. I just drew them back in on her face and shot her.
It's so amazing how you started with Hans Christian Andersen and comic books. You started comic books, and then you later in your career, you went to fashion magazines, and that was kind of your tracing paper or your motifs that you started changing and making your own.
Well, I did that. I still see, I'll make this really quick, but I see it as, it's so contemptible. Just like pornography is so contemptible in the culture, and so is fashion and glamour. And people have so much, they think of it as shallow. Oh, don't do this yet. I think I want to just make this point first. And I thought it was this giant engine of the culture, and it's the one place where women have real power, is the fashion industry. And at the same time, I recognize that it creates body dysmorphia. And at the same time, you get so much pleasure out of looking at these images. And at the same time, you're never going to look like that. So I thought this constant balance, I thought that's the interesting place. And this is like a billion-dollar industry, and why aren't we examining it? Or why are we examining this self-hatred? And that's what I tried to show in all of these fashion pornography images, basically, is these are two industries that are held in contempt by the art world, especially.
When you look at a work like this, so the title is Blowjobs. Of course, there is a very famous Andy Warhol blowjob, and we know what it literally means in regular banal life, not in the art world. You have like a connotation, because that could also be a balloon in that context, also has a different meaning. We all know what that means. And it's wet and it's libidinous, and the fingernails, they look chopped and dirty. And the whole surfaces, you are creating these very libidinous, dense layerings of what do you actually look at is actually the focus surface, the fingernail, or the drop below the fingernail, or the drop on, if that's a balloon or a condom or whatever this is, or is that person behind? Is that actually the mouth that is blowing up the balloon? So I think it's a very complex layering of how are we zooming into your work. And that leads perhaps to the next video, where we show how complex you layer and you construct your images. Perhaps we look at this.
Yeah.
We start the video. Great. Oops, I hope it's starting. No, it didn't really start. It jumped. We try it. We try it perhaps again to show it.
Okay, we'll try one more time.
It worked this morning. It jumps.
It's kind of cool. Well, it's one dot on the eyelid.
Basically,
and that's what it ends up. You go from that one fingerprint. This is a big painting, 10-foot painting. So
And what's a video, I'm just describing what the video does. The video zooms in onto a very small little white particle on the eyelashes and then slowly zooms out. It's a little bit like Janet Leigh in Hitchcock when you have her eye and you finally see that she's under the shower. So you really have this detail that you pull out of. And I think it's very beautiful to see how, let's go to the next slide. It's great to see how you basically construct your images.
Well, now I think the bubbles were leading me into painting in photos behind glass. And I got off the subway one day and I saw this tongue, this bag of this shopping bag this woman was carrying, and she had a tongue, but it had yellow on it. And I thought, wow, what would it look like if I made drawings? I made photos and paintings of painting with my tongue. I did this whole series behind glass, and this is one of the photos. Want to keep going?
Yeah.
This is a whole series that I did, and I'm gonna get to the paintings in a minute. These paintings are like, here's two of them that were in my show at Reagan projects a few years, like I think 2011, and these paintings are 15 feet by 10. And they are at least 80 layers of Photoshop. This is when I really got into Photoshopping. And I took those pictures of all of these two images, same model. But I constructed these paintings. It was like, took over a year and a half to make these paintings.
Did you, using billboards in the city, did this inform the scale of your work? Or was this just a work that was a scale part of your conceptual frameworks, that you wanted something that has this monumental image quality?
It changes meaning as far as I can tell. You know, really, it's like Jeff Koons changing like a porcelain doll to the scale, you know, a 6-foot porcelain doll. It changes the meaning, and that's what I was thinking about. That, you know, you take some really narrow area of the human body, and you know, even lapping up things, lapping up ice cream. This is like something we all know, but you never see a picture of. Lapping up candy.
Yeah. I want to show the video, Green Pink Caviar, which follows.
Here's the video.
Slide.
Okay.
Say a bit more about the video, Marilyn. I couldn't hear everything. There was a bit of an overlay with the sound.
Well, it's you can see it on YouTube easily. Because I never sold it. I just made it, and it was shown on you know, in Times Square for 4 months, and also at MoMA in the lobby for over a year, and then. Madonna bought it and put it on as a backdrop of her Sticky and Sweet tour. And then she flew us over there to see, gave us tickets to see it. And then she became one of my collector. She was my collector before that, but I was shooting this woman at Mengesha because she was pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant. And we were playing around. She's like styled herself. And she wanted pictures of herself pregnant. And, but then we started playing, and these are both paintings, and she was pregnant, and this liquid that's in all this work is vodka and candy, and so she couldn't really swallow it. She just let it spill out of her mouth. So I took those pictures, and then same thing. This is that was a painting. These are photos, and I thought, oh, you know, splashing in mud puddles, and this is a video I made recent 5 or 6 years ago, and this is a still from it. If you want to show that video.
Let's see if we're more lucky with the video. Great.
Well, I wanted to tell you a little about the music.
Yes.
Jay-Z's assistant said we need better sound for this video, and so Rock Nation gave me this really interesting sound designer, and he was unknown. He was 27 years old, and he did the sound for this whole video, which is an 8-minute video, and he did it over 2 nights. And then the next time I saw him, he was the producer of Childish Gambino. And then that was great because I love Donald Glover and I love that music. And then the next time I saw him, he's getting a Grammy for Childish Gambino. And then the next time I saw him, he's getting an Academy Award for Black Panther. So his name is Lyndon
That's
Gordon.
incredible.
Yeah. So he did it for free for me.
We still have 30 more slides, and I'm going through faster because I would like to ask you some more questions.
Okay. I'm sorry I went so long. Yeah.
No, wonderful. I'm like, we could do this for 3 hours, Marilyn. We could do this for hours. It's wonderful.
They're all this is 2 photos. These are photos. And then I started working with, this is a painting. This is graffiti, broken glass. And I was thinking of, like, in Manhattan, we have all these old ads sitting around, advertisements, and they're under glass and they got graffiti on them. And this is one, and this is quickly I'll go through my process. This is a finished painting. It's about 15 feet long. And then I'll show you how I got to it. Can you go to the next?
Yes, you're going to the next.
Now, this is how I started. This is a photo I took in 2000 something. And I just took a piece of glass, I put it in front of it with graffiti on top. And then I started shooting it. It was a rainy night. And this is the bones of the painting. This is what I started with. And this is a photo. And so the next thing I did was go back one. Asa, could you go back? Yeah, thanks. I put realistic, in focus image inside the circle, and then I also changed the V. So go to the next one. And this is, go the other way, sorry. And then keep going. And now see I changed the entire right side. And the terrible thing is I changed the entire right side and I also painted the entire left side. So then I hated the left side. I hated that smutsy look. So next one, please. I took the entire left side out. So I painted this at the end. So I really build these up, and this took over a year to do. And this is this is my process, and that's why they take so long. They're layers and layers of paint too, so we get all the depth and that I can't get with anything else. Okay, you can go to the next one. And these are photos that I've been working with in a lot lately. It's breath, and that's a painting. Breath on glass, breathing on cold glass or steamy glass, and then that led to touching steamy glass. Painting with your tongue. And then the next one. Oh yeah, this is a whole body of work I did because I was seeing all these young girls lasering off their pubic hair. And I thought, wow, I know I've been in the 60s, I plucked all my eyebrows out and they never grew back. So I thought, well, I'm gonna show these young girls that have never seen pubic hair. So I want to show them what pictures of pubic hair look like. So I shot all these races and all these colors of pubic hair just to show young girls that it's not terrible. Groom. And then I made paintings out of them because I thought no one's ever seen pubic hair and not in all of art history. And these are all paintings, giant paintings of pubic hair, different colors, different races. And nobody buys them, of course, but I think they're great. And I'm going to keep them all and show them all together.
Well, you mention often that these pieces, you kept them. Where are all these pieces?
Well, I have I'll go back for a second. Jeannie Greenberg has a couple of them. And the rest, I'm showing them in my show at Montpellier in France. And, they show in different places all the time, but the minute people find out their pubic hair, they freak out. Even though you know, what's wrong with them? They're so beautiful. I make them as gorgeous as I possibly can.
I want to show 2 photos of my country. And
okay, these are photos, and this is the video in the last show. And it was after Trump got elected, and I thought, well, if we're going to be called cunts, I'm going to shove it down your throat. So I had these different races of women and different kinds of girls and young girls.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood, the video is running.
My country they're writing, but I'm changing, like, they can write whatever they want.
Great, thank you.
Or controversy instead of controversy. So then this led to working behind glass. It led to me painting all these bathers, because we're also used to seeing all through art history, bathers being painted either allegorically or prosaically, you know, and I thought, well, I'm going to see what a 21st century bather looks like painted by women. They're all painted by men, all the ones we're used to. And I thought, does it change the meaning? Same thing, do they look different when they're painted by women? Because men have done women grooming since the dawn of time. And the paintings I'm doing, the next show I have is in France at this museum in Montpellier, and it's all bathers and pubic hair. This is my show at Reagan Projects, the last one.
And before we go into the discussion about the work in a more broader sense, I want to show 11 more slides that basically show a bit the process.
Yeah.
How you create a portrait. And it's beautiful to see when I look at you, Marilyn, here at the studio background.
Yeah, there's one behind me.
Behind you, so you're still working on them.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna keep making bathers for a while. I just love making them all different colors, all different races. I was playing around when I first started with those pre-Raphaelite kind of women. Oh yeah, here's an interesting one. This slide, I painted that entire left side painting, but I thought it was too pretty. So I just hated it. So the right side painting is where it is now. This is a 2-year painting, this one. Okay, this one on the left is the reference that I work from, and the painting on the right is the progress I've made. Same with this one. They'll be done in a couple of months, but I can't get back in my studio.
This is exactly behind you in the studio, right?
Well, this one actually is not. This one is this is a big one. The one behind me is the next one, I think.
Ah.
Yeah, that's this one.
Okay.
So I'm except it's gotten a lot more progress since then. Since I took this slide. These are ones I just started. The one on the yeah, and they're little. These are little ones. Because I want
4 feet.
and then I also started this whole series of portraits of iconic people. And here is, on the left is Jeannie Greenberg Royatin, and on the right is Ryan McGinley. And I was just about to shoot Lizzo when we were quarantined, and I'm also doing Beyonce and Stella McCartney, and people that I think of as iconic. Now, this is the last thing I made, and it probably is it's gonna be a painting. And it's from, and I thought, call it Quarantine. And it's like from shooting Ryan McGinley, and I had all these images. So, just organically, this is what I started making. And this will be a painting that I show in the next about 6 months, I'll have it finished. I haven't even started it yet because I don't have the metal to make a.
How long are you working on a piece like this, Marilyn?
Well, this piece will take about 6 months because it's not going to be big. These paintings are going to take, 8, 9 months. They're 4x6. All of the iconic people are going to be 4x6. When
we look at something that is like the work in your studio right now, you have all these layers. Do you want to
get close?
Keep this here because this is behind you.
Will you see this? I guess you will.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Okay, you can see like all the different layers. Can you see it? Are they in focus?
Yes, it's pretty incredible.
And then I work from this image, and I use that window so I don't get lost, because it's so easy to get lost. So you can see there's a depth and a richness. I'm really a pointillist at this point, because that's the only way I can paint steam. So there's no way you could call me a photorealist.
If you went a little back, when we look at your wall, and I'm sorry, this is not rehearsed, but I think it's tempting to not do that. I think it's incredible to have the different layers of these works. This is incredible.
Well, this is really early. I have a lot of work to do on this one. Let's see, I'm looking it upside down. Yeah, this is just the first coat. And then this is gonna be my 15-footer that's gonna be in Jeannie's new gallery. And I can't even.
While we are in the studio, Marilyn, you often, we said we had the tracing books, the comic books, we have the magazines. So your work is often, your work is based either on a video or a photographic image that you create, you compose, you put the pearls in the mouth, you put the grease, whatever it is. So you create an image, and first is the image that's an analog image. Pearls in the mouth, kind of pearls on the shoe, the mud, the grease. Then you do work. You were one of the very first artists that I was aware of that dealt with Photoshop in a very creative way, a very free way. You dealt with it very freely, and you completely changed the image. And then you mentioned earlier that you were, when you had the collaboration, thought about Sigmar Polke, the layering, the projection. So I think being in the studio, it's so incredibly informative to think about the layering. So you have the photographic. How does the photographic analog then digitally changed? How do you decide that it is a completed painting?
Well, that's a good question, because I could make something I love in the reference, but once I see it as a painting, it could fail for me. And I'm the one that does all the last layer. So if it doesn't work, I'll just erase it. I'll sand it right off and start something else. It's something I know right away when it's finished, but there's really no way I can explain it to you. Mm-hmm. And I can't let anything out unless it's perfect. So I have a lot of paintings that are still stuck in the studio because I haven't figured out how to solve the problems. But the whole interest for me is how to solve the problems. That's where the fun is. Mm-hmm. Figuring it out. And I can do it in Photoshop, because honestly, I think my team and I was really good at one point, but it's gotten way beyond me in terms of, I'm a genius for my age group, but I get somebody that's right out of school, they've learned all these new techniques that I don't even know. So I stopped trying to do it, but I work with technicians that are just fantastic. So we make a bones of an image, and then it becomes something else entirely. It's like
Marilyn, when I look at the wall behind you, are these drawings, drafts? Are these studies? Is it material?
Photography, yeah. For me, they're drawings.
Mm-hmm.
They're drawings. The paintings are a different thing entirely. So the photo for me is a drawing. For a traditional artist, it would be. Now, something about my particular skill level didn't really make sense. If I could project it, it's going to be a lot faster. And since I'm doing all these layers, I figured I could make a painting, but it's like, I could take me a year to do one painting, even a small one. But if I could get underpainters to build up the surface, I could teach them how to paint the way I figured out this technique, then I'm much more able to make the next body of work. So I've got to be about a year and a half ahead of my team. And I only have 6 painters. So I've been working with the same people for, some of them 15 years, some of them longer.
Mm-hmm. In the last couple of years, your work seems to be looked at differently and seems to be interpreted differently. We talked about that earlier, that I said, perhaps you were just too early to show this. How do you deal with this interest and reinterpretation of earlier works of yours at the moment?
Well, it's very rewarding, but I always knew I had something to say. So I sort of didn't care if anyone saw it or not. But I can't say that I didn't care. I just didn't go there. Like, I have so much fun, I have so much pleasure in making art. I don't really care if people are going to get it now or later. But sooner or later, they always get it. That's been my experience so far. Like, just from the photos of my mother or the photorealist paintings. I mean,
for me, it's fascinating that an artist knows what's important, because when I looked through the material you and I were preparing for this, I thought there is this photorealistic black and white painting that you made into a sculpture, and there 40 years later you still have it. Of course you have it, because you knew how important that was, and you knew how important even the drawing you made as a kid were. So
I didn't know the drawings, but I sort of knew. No one's ever done this before. I used to just keep this one. All the others broke. I had about 10 of them. That's sad. But I wasn't taking care of things like I should have. I mean, I had a lot more of those photorealist paintings of the things on the floor, and I just painted over them because I thought nobody cares, you know. But some of them I kept. I knew not to destroy them somewhere.
How is teaching part of your work?
Well, I love to teach because I love that light bulb going off in people's, you know, it's like such a treasure thing. And I learn so much from my students, and I don't see it as, I see it as an exchange of ideas, and it gives me enormous pleasure, and I'll never stop. You know, I mean, I don't teach like, I'm an adjunct, so, and I travel around a lot, but I never get tired of it. I don't do it that much, so it doesn't cut into my time that much, but it's where I get a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, I can only thank you for everything we learned through this beautiful visit, and revealing an insightful, very personal visit to talk through the work with you. That was incredible. Thank you, Marilyn. That was really very special. Thank you.